Hello guys and welcome back to FATBOSS TV. Today we're back for more raid testing on the 7.3 PTR, and today we're having a look at Coven of Shivarra in Antorus, the Burning Throne.
Yes, this boss is around 9th in the instance and it's a council style fight. You'll be fighting 3 bosses with a shared health pool, although only 2 of them will be active at any given time as they rotate throughout the fight. The non-active boss will be outside of the room, tormenting the souls of the Pantheon, which causes them to cast some really impactful abilities that you need to deal with. Now before we go into anything, just as a quick reminder that this is footage from the PTR, so things are subject to change, although they usually don't change too much. Either way, there will be a full guide for this encounter once we've defeated it on live servers. So let's kick straight into it and talk about the bosses.
Now as Alex said, these bosses do have a shared health pool, but unfortunately you cannot stack them up. If the bosses are within 18 yards of each other, they simply just take 99% less damage. So throughout the fight, the tanks will want to keep them as close together as possible, but still not within the 18 yard range, triggering the damage reduction. At the beginning of the encounter, you'll be fighting against Nora and Sargeras, whilst Dima is outside the arena tormenting the Titans. Now the tanks will need to make sure that they face Nora away from the raid at all times because of her fiery strike. This is a frontal cleave which also applies a debuff that increases the damage you take from this ability by 100% and this stacks. Because the damage taken increase, eventually you are going to need to tank swap, and whilst doing so you still want to try and keep the mobs at least 18 yards apart so they don't get the damage reduction, but if they do have to pass each other for a short period, that's absolutely fine. Nora will also cast out Whirling Saber. This throws out a sword dealing damage to anyone within its targeting circle as it lands. The sword will then just start to spin whilst travelling slowly back towards her. You need to make sure that you keep out the way of the sword's path to avoid taking any of the damage. She'll also place a bunch of debuffs on the raid called Fulminating Pulse. This is a 10-second dot that will cause all players to explode when it expires, dealing splash damage to anyone within 6 yards. Players with the debuff just need to make sure that nobody is within their circle when the debuff expires. And that's everything you need to know with Nora. Let's move on to Sargeras.
So Sargeras will be dealing random bursts of damage to players in the raid with her Touch of Darkness cast, as well as sending out 3 blades when she casts Shadow Blades. These blades will knock back and deal damage to anyone that they hit, so you just want to try and sidestep them if you can. They do move pretty slowly, so as long as you have your wits about you, you should be fine. Her most impactful ability is Storm of Darkness. This will do a large amount of ticking damage to the raid over a 15-second period. Fortunately, multiple safe zones will spawn in the arena, and whilst you remain within these zones, you completely avoid the damage. So you want to make sure everyone goes in these zones just to avoid the damage, with tanks dragging the 2 bosses to different zones to make sure that they don't gain the damage reduction. This ability can overlap with others. As an example, you can get the Fulminating Pulse debuffs expire whilst the Storm of Darkness is being channeled. You kind of just have to deal with these overlaps on the fly. Like if you're in a zone with a lot of people, you should probably move out of the zone to let your debuff time out whilst you use the damage reduction, just so you don't splash on anyone else. But if there's relatively few people in the zone, you should be able to stand within it and have your debuff time out without splashing onto other people. So they're all of the abilities that you'll have to be dealing with while you're fighting Sargeras and Nora. Now before we talk about the special abilities the Tormented Titans cast every 80 seconds or so, let's talk about the other boss that will join the fight around 3 minutes in, and this is Dima. When she joins, Nora, which is the Fire Lady, will leave, so you'll have to be dealing with Dima and Sargeras.
Now for tanks, she has Flash Freeze. This deals a big burst of damage to the tank and applies a debuff which reduces your movement speed by 10% for 20 seconds. The tanks will need to taunt off one another again for this debuff, because if the debuff goes too high, the tank won't be able to move whatsoever. They'll be completely frozen on the spot, and this might prevent you from getting into safe areas during the Storm of Darkness. For healers to deal with is Chill Blood. This is a healing absorption debuff placed on multiple members of your raid. When the debuff eventually times out, the players will be stunned, and this stun duration is based on the amount of heal absorption remaining, with the stun being longer for more absorb left on the debuff. The stun has a nasty habit of overlapping with big mechanics in the encounter which require movement, so being stunned during this time can easily kill a player. Heal off the debuff and you don't need to worry about it. Nadeem's most noticeable ability is Orb of Frost. This will create a giant frost orb in the room which deals a flat amount of damage to the raid when it spawns. Afterwards it doesn't do any damage, however any players within 30 yards will be slowed by 85%. However, the further away you are from the orb, the weaker the slow effect is. There isn't much you can do about this ability, you just want to try your best to move away from it, so you can just move around the encounter normally. The orbs only last for around 20 seconds or so if you do put it in a really bad location and it affects the majority of the raid, you'll just need to deal with it just for those 20 seconds, and then you'll be absolutely fine. So that's what all the bosses do while they're active. Let's talk about how they screw with your raid while they are sat out.
Now, as soon as the boss sits out, it will begin to torment one of the 4 Titan souls around the edges of the room. During this 80-second long cast, the raid will be receiving ever-increasing stacks of a dot called Sense of Dread. Once the cast completes, the Sense of Dread debuff will drop, and the raid will have to deal with whatever ability the boss casted. The ability the boss chooses is random every single time, however you can see in advance what they are casting by checking your raid frames. So let's have a look at the 4 Titan abilities, which all summon adds around the sides of the room that the raid needs to kill. Torment of Aman'Thul will spawn on multiple adds that will just stand there casting. They do not need to be tanked and they cannot be moved. Their long uninterruptible cast will cause them to apply a dot to the raid which can stack, but this cast will also heal the add to full health. So the raid must focus down the adds to make sure that they die before the cast goes off. It's unlikely that you're going to be able to kill all of the adds before the first cast finishes, so the raid should probably just focus on killing a few of them, rather than dotting everything up, which can lead to nothing dying and then just allow the debuff to stack really high. Torment of Golgotha adds will stand still just like the Aman'Thul adds. These guys don't need to be tanked and instead they'll just do a nasty burst of damage to any player who stands within 2 yards of anyone else. So the raid needs to be spread apart from one another as you quickly kill off the adds. These guys won't heal, so multi-dotting and cleaving these guys just to do as much damage as possible is totally worth it. Torment of Groff will summon adds that will be spaced evenly around the sides of the room. All of these adds will channel a flamethrower into the middle of the room, which deals a ton of damage to anyone who stands within it. You want to move to the sides of the room before the ability comes in, so you can quickly stand between 2 of these adds and avoid the flamethrower. Once you're safe, you want to move around the edges of the room and kill off the adds as soon as possible just to gain control of the room again. Last, but definitely not least, is the Torment of Ganon. This spawns a ton of old man adds that start walking towards the middle of the room. If you come into contact with these adds, you'll take an absolute ton of damage and it'll pretty much kill you. Now the adds only have like 1 health, but they are immune to all damage for 30 seconds after they spawn, so the raid needs to avoid the adds for 30 seconds before quickly clearing them up once the immunity is dropped off. Now these adds can be CC'd in lots of different ways, including hard CCs like paralysis, but you just got to be careful with things like knockbacks and other displacing effects, as the adds can be knocked back into other players, which is likely to kill them. But yeah, these adds are pretty easy to deal with. As long as you can CC and dodge them for 30 seconds, you'll be absolutely fine. Now that's all of the Titan abilities. Once one of them has been casted, the boss will randomly choose another one to cast, and every 2 casts, the active bosses will rotate, and this will just continue until the bosses are dead. And honestly, that's the fight. It's all about dealing with individual mechanics as they come in, whilst dealing with the pretty forgiving overlaps the best you can. So, what do we think?
I think it's a great fight. I'm actually quite a big fan of this encounter. One thing I would say, which is a little bit interesting, this is mainly sort of looking forward towards Mythic.
Yeah.
The encounter, like you said, it's not actually that difficult. Obviously, there's quite a lot of abilities, and there are some overlaps that are kind of difficult, but it's all simple mechanics, right?
Yeah.
I'm a little bit curious as to what they're going to do on Mythic in terms of scaling, because of course we have done Mythic testing for this encounter.
It's great fun. You have 2 Titan abilities at a time.
It's awesome, but it didn't feel that difficult.
No.
So I'm curious to see how they're actually going to make this fight, considering it's so late in the instance as well.
Yeah.
How hard it's actually going to be.
Yeah, I've got a couple of theories about why it might be, like, so easy, and it might be just due to how well they telegraph their attacks. Like, it's super obvious, even if you know nothing about this boss, just by being an experienced player of the game, you can just see, oh, someone's got a red circle around them, don't stand in that.
Yeah.
Oh, there are these really holy zones in the darkness, I should probably stand in that. Or the bosses, they've gone purple when they're close to each other, that doesn't look good. Or there's like a really spooky old man insta-kill person running at me, should probably move out of his way. Yeah, everything is really well telegraphed, so you can just instantly recognize that's what we got to do. And most of the mechanics you can just react to, apart from maybe a couple of the torments, such as the flamethrower one. If you react to that, you'll probably be dead. But most of the other ones, you can just see that something bad has happened and then deal with it, which is kind of unusual for such a late fight in the instance.
Yeah.
Normally, most things need preparation. You need to be ready before things happen, rather than having to deal with it afterwards.
And this fight is pretty self-explanatory, as you said. The way that the spells come at you, it was very clear what was bad and what is good.
But that being said, I still really did enjoy my time with the fight. I think it is going to be a really fun fight. But yeah, I think they could probably speed up the fight by like 25%, and it would still be like fine, you know?
Oh, what you mean it won't become overwhelming?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I was thinking more, it's kind of a long fight. Maybe it should be a little bit shorter.
Maybe so. Yeah. Well, you probably just stack 20 million Shadow Priests and it'll be like a 3-minute fight anyway. So
surrender to madness. Let's go. But thank you very much for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this little preview, then please do drop us down a like. It helps us out a lot. And before we do go, a huge thank you to all of our supporters over on Patreon. You guys are awesome. We really do appreciate all the support you guys give us. and we shall see you all in the next video.
Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching.